So guys, I was saying that if you divide 18 by 20 and then you divide the answer by 30, you will get the answer that is 0.03. So the answer is A. Let's move on to MCQ number 17. What is the sequence of contractions in one heartbeat? So guys, you should know that whenever your heart beats and when your heartbeat starts, when the heartbeat starts, the atria contract first. That is, both the right atrium and the left atrium, they contract together. So first there is atrial contraction when both the atria contract. And then after the contraction of atria, ventricles contract. That is the contraction of both the right ventricle and the left ventricle. They contract together. And then there is a pause in which the entire heart is relaxing. So guys, whenever your heart beats, it's the contraction of atria first. That is the contraction of both right and the left atrium. They contract together. And then there is contraction of ventricles where right ventricle and left ventricle, they contract together. And then there is a pause in which all the chambers relax. So the answer is C. This is the correct sequence of events or sequence of contractions in one heartbeat. Let's move on to MCQ number 18. The diagram shows a section through a part of a vein. What could be the first organs found in directions 1 and 2 on the diagram? So guys, whenever you see a vein and you see a valve, obviously veins have valves. So valves basically guide you the direction of blood flow. And always remember that wherever the flaps of the valves, they point, wherever the valve flaps point, that is the direction of the blood flow. So the blood is flowing in this direction, right? And as you all know that veins, how do we define veins? Veins carry blood towards the heart. So if the blood is flowing in this direction, it's going to the heart, and the direction 1 shows which organ? Heart. And direction 2, it could be a brain. Why? Because the blood can go from the brain back to the heart via a vein. So the answer is A. Let's move on to MCQ number 19. What is the difference between the contents of the plasma and the contents of the tissue fluid? Okay, so plasma contains dissolved glucose. This is true. Tissue fluid contains no dissolved glucose. This is false. Guys, plasma and tissue fluid, they both contain same concentration of glucose. Less dissolved glucose, more dissolved glucose, no. Same concentration of dissolved glucose. Plasma has more protein molecules. This is true. And tissue fluid has fewer protein molecules. This is true. Right? No white blood cells. Guys, plasma have white blood cells and tissue fluid also have white blood cells. So the answer is C. Guys, you should know that tissue fluid is formed when the blood plasma leaks out of the capillaries. And always remember this point that the plasma, as it leaks from the capillaries, to leak from the capillaries, it has to pass through small pores in the capillary wall. And those pores or gaps are very small, so they don't allow large proteins to pass through. That's why tissue fluid has far fewer proteins. You should know that plasma leaks to form tissue fluid, right? And when the plasma leaks, the large proteins do not leak. And as a result, tissue fluid has far fewer proteins as compared to the blood plasma. Let's move on to MCQ number 20. Which statement describes an example of active immunity? So guys, if we talk about active immunity, what is active immunity? Active immunity is when an antigen enters the body naturally or an antigen is injected into the body. And when that antigen goes into the body, it causes the activation of lymphocytes and production of antibodies and production of memory cells. Always remember this point that whenever they say active immunity, so active processes are going on inside your body, and for that antigen must be inserted. Because when the foreign antigen enters the body naturally or via the injection, what happens is that it triggers the immune response. That is, the lymphocytes are activated and they produce antibodies and they produce memory cells. So what is an example of active immunity? Antibodies pass through the placenta. No, guys, gaining of antibodies is passive immunity, not active immunity. For active immunity, you need to take up the antigen, right? A person is given an injection of antibiotics. No. A person is given an injection of antigens, yes, from pathogens that cause a disease, and after this, the body produces antibody against these pathogens. This is the answer, right? The clotting of blood prevents the disease-causing bacteria entering the circulatory system. Guys, this is the role of the external defense system. So whenever there's a cut on the skin and the bleeding starts, right? So what happens is that the blood clots to close the blood vessel or to seal the blood vessel so that the bacteria do not enter the circulatory system. This is basically the role of external defense system, which prevents the entry of pathogens. And C is the answer because antigens derived from a particular pathogen are injected into a person, and these antigens trigger an immune response leading to the production of antibodies, right? Let's move on to MCQ number 21. Which words all describe the organism that cause malaria? So guys, malaria is caused by Plasmodium, and you should know that Plasmodium is the prototist, right? And obviously it's microscopic. It's a parasite. Why it's microscopic? Because it's unicellular. It's a prototist, and prototists are unicellular eukaryotes, right? It's a eukaryotic cell and unicellular eukaryote. What is meant by eukaryote? A cell which contains a nucleus. So it's a unicellular eukaryote, and because it's unicellular, it's microscopic. It's a parasite because it feeds on our nutrition, and it's a pathogen because it causes disease, that is the malaria, right? It's microscopic, it's parasite, but it's not sexually transmitted. It is transmitted by the female Anopheles mosquito, right? It's not a mosquito, it's not a vector, it's a pathogen. It's a parasite, not sexually transmitted, it's not a vector. This vector is an organism which transmits pathogen from an infected person to a non-infected person. So in this case, the pathogen, which is the Plasmodium, is transmitted by the female Anopheles mosquito, which is the vector. Let's move on to the next MCQ, that is MCQ number 22. Which action can prevent the spread of human immunodeficiency virus HIV? So guys, you should know that HIV transmission is via the sexual intercourse, and it can the spread of the HIV can be prevented by using condoms during sexual intercourse, right? This is the most effective method to prevent the spread of HIV. Let's discuss the other options. Keeping healthy by taking regular exercise. Guys, this cannot prevent the spread of HIV. Avoiding contact with the saliva. Guys, you should know that the HIV in an infected person is present in the blood, in semen, in vaginal fluids, in breast milk. Much of it is not present in the saliva. Saliva rarely has HIV. So if you avoid contact with saliva, so that is not a major factor that can prevent the spread of HIV. Breastfeeding babies will transmit HIV because HIV is present in the breast milk. So if the option was stop breastfeeding babies, so this could be an answer. Over here, the best answer is using condoms during sexual intercourse. The answer is D. 23. Which row matches the parts of the urinary system to their functions? Makes urine. So guys, you all know that kidney makes urine. Carries urine. Ureter carries urine. Holds urine. Guys, bladder holds urine or stores urine. And urethra removes the urine from the body. The answer is C. Let's move on to MCQ number 24. Which action is not an example of simple reflex action? So guys, you should know that the simple reflex actions are the reflex actions which are inborn, and you don't learn these reflexes, right? Simple reflex actions are inborn or innate. You don't need to learn these reflexes. These reflexes are in you by birth. And then there are complex reflex actions, and complex reflex actions are those reflex actions which you learn, right? So over here, we have to identify a complex reflex action because the question says that which action is not an example of simple reflex action. So blinking when sand blows in your eyes is inborn reflex, right? This is something that you don't learn. Jumping when hearing a loud noise is inborn. Removing your hand from a hot object is inborn reflex. Stopping a car at a road junction. So if you suddenly stop a car when you see a road junction, that is a learned reflex because you learned to drive, right? So this is a complex reflex action. The answer is D. Let's move on to MCQ number 25. A person is reading a book in a room with low light intensity. Which row shows the state of the eye muscles? So guys, if a person is reading a book, it means if the person is reading a book, it means that there is close vision or near vision, right? So book is near to the person's eyes and there is low light intensity, right? So this means that there is a dim light. Okay. So which row shows the state of the eye muscles? So guys, remember the rule of 3 C's and the rule of 4 C's. First of all, we will discuss the rule of 3 C's, and this is for the state of iris muscles in the bright light, right? The rule of 3 C's, what does it say? That whenever circular muscles contract, circular muscles, when they contract, it causes, whenever they contract, it causes constriction of the pupil, right? So you all know that whenever there is bright light or whenever light intensity is high, whenever there is bright light or whenever there is high light intensity, there is constriction of pupil. You all know that, right? And rule of 3 C's will tell you that whenever pupil constricts, circular muscles contract. And obviously if circular muscles contract, the radial muscles relax. Yes or no? Because these two muscles are antagonistic. Over here we have dim light. So the things will be opposite. What will happen? Because in the bright light, circular muscles, they contract and radial muscles relax. In the dim light, what will happen? Circular muscles will relax and the radial muscles will contract, right? So circular muscles need to be relaxed. Iris circular muscles need to be relaxed because this is the dim light, and radial muscles need to be contracted. So the answer could be B or D. Now let's discuss about the ciliary muscles. And for ciliary muscles, always follow the rule of 4 C's. Rule of 4 C's. Whenever there is close vision or whenever there is near vision, close vision, what will happen? The ciliary muscles will contract. And what will happen when the ciliary muscles contract? The suspensory ligaments will slacken. They will become slack. So C for slack, right? C for contract, C for ciliary muscles, C for close vision, rule of 4 C's. So guys, always remember the rule of 4 C's for the close vision, right? So because this is a close vision, the ciliary muscles should contract. And in close vision, they contract, causing the suspensory ligaments to become slack or become loosen, right? So the answer is B. MCQ number 26, which structures are all involved in controlling human body temperature? So guys, you should know that to control human body temperature, blood vessels near the skin are involved, pituitary gland is not involved, sweat glands are involved. Blood vessels near the skin are involved, hypothalamus is involved, and muscles are involved. The answer is B. Muscles are involved in shivering, right? And in the vasoconstriction also. Hypothalamus is involved because it detects the changes in the temperature of the blood, and it also sends signals or electrical impulses to the muscles and to the sweat glands and to the blood vessels, right? Kidneys are not involved in the maintenance of body temperature. The answer is B. Let's move on to MCQ number 27. Which row shows the effects of the hormone glucagon and insulin? So guys, I told you that the glucagon is released when glucose is gone. So I tell my students that glucagon is released when glucose is gone. So read glucagon as glucagon. Glucagon is released when glucose is gone. So that means glucose concentration is low. And to replenish glucose, the glycogen in the liver must be converted to glucose, right? So what glucagon does that it stimulates the liver cells to break down glycogen into glucose because glucose is gone. The body needs to replenish glucose, right? Okay. And you should remember that glycogen in the liver is converted to glucose, not in any other organ. So glycogen in the liver is converted to glucose. What is the role of insulin? The effect of insulin is opposite. Glucose is converted to glycogen in the liver, and that is the role of insulin. The answer is B. Be careful. The option C says pancreas. No, guys, in pancreas, this does not occur. Let's move on to MCQ number 28. What is the role of auxin in the control of phototropism in the shoot of a plant? Okay, guys, so we have to discuss what is phototropism. Phototropism is when the shoot of the plant bends towards the light. And to be more precise, this is known as the positive phototropism. How do we define positive phototropism? When the shoot of the plant bends towards the light. What happens to the roots? Obviously, the roots, what these roots do, they bend away from the light, and that is called negative phototropism. So normally what happens is that shoots, they bend towards the light, that is positive phototropism, and roots, they bend away from the light, that is negative phototropism. So we have to state the role of auxins in the phototropism in shoots, and always remember that in shoots there is which phototropism? Positive phototropism, right? So what is the role of auxins in the positive phototropism? The role of the auxins is that they cause this shoot to bend, and I will let you know how. So for example, what happens is that one part or one area of the shoot gets light and the other area is in the shade. So always remember this point, that if this part of the area is in light, this part is getting the light, then this area is in the shade. And auxins, where do they collect? Auxins collect in the area which is in shade. Always remember this point. And auxins, what auxins do, that they induce cell elongation. So what happens is that auxins collect in the area of the shade, and these auxin molecules, they induce cell elongation. So they stimulate the cells to elongate over here, and the cells grow and elongate, which causes the shoot to bend towards light, because more cells grow, or we can say cells grow at a faster rate at this point wherever there are auxins. So this part will bend, right? And this will lead to the bending of the shoot towards the light. Always remember this point, that if there are two areas, and if, for example, over here, if growth occurs in the red area, the bending will be like this. Right? And if the growth occurs in the black area, the bending will be in the opposite direction. Right? So, because the growth occurs in this point, this area expands more and this area expands less, so the shoot bends towards the light. That is positive phototropism. So what is the role of auxin in the control of phototropism in the shoot of a plant? What is the answer? Auxin is only made on the shaded side of the shoot. This causes the cells on the shaded side to grow longer. So guys, you should know that auxins are not made on the shaded side. Always remember this point, that auxins, where are they made? Auxins are made at the root tip. This is a very high yield point. That guys, auxin molecules are made at the root tip and then they go downwards. So they're not made in the shaded area, they are made in the root tip. That's why option A is wrong. More auxin is distributed on the shaded side of the shoot. This causes the cells on the shaded side to grow longer. This is the right answer, that more auxins are distributed on the shaded side of the root. because auxins are distributed on the shaded side. And over here, over there in the shaded side, the cells, they grow because of the auxins, they grow longer. There's cell elongation, and this causes the shoot to bend towards the light, and that is positive phototropism. Let's move on to MCQ number 29. The diagram shows the chromosomes in a cell nucleus. Which diagram shows the product of one division of cell nucleus by mitosis? So guys, you all know that whenever mitosis occurs, what happens in mitosis, that mitosis is a nuclear division in which this nucleus will divide to form how many nuclei? 2 nuclei. Always remember this point, that mitosis results in the formation of 2 nuclei. So C and D are wrong, and you should know that mitosis results in the same number of chromosomes. Mitosis is a nuclear division which maintains the chromosome number. So over here we can see how many chromosomes are there. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. So the answer is B. Whenever mitosis will occur, each daughter nucleus will contain the same number of chromosomes as the parent nucleus. So for example, over here we have 6 chromosomes. So in each daughter cell we will have 6 chromosomes, or we can say that in this nucleus we have 6 chromosomes. So in each daughter nucleus we will have 6 chromosomes. So B is the answer, which shows mitosis. Let's move on to MCQ number 30. The diagram shows the parts of a flower. Where must pollen land to pollinate the flower? So guys, whenever pollination occurs, the pollen moves from the anthers to the stigma. So the pollen lands onto the stigma, and the answer is D. And pollen is produced by the anthers. So guys, this is the anther. Okay, let's move on to MCQ number 31. Which conditions are needed for the germination of most seeds? So guys, you should know that for the germination of most seeds, what is required? Oxygen is required, water is required, and suitable temperature is required, right? Suitable temperature is required. So what should be the answer? For the germination of most seeds, water is required, oxygen is required, and carbon dioxide is not required. The answer is D. Let's move on to MCQ number 32. Which row correctly matches a hormone with its function in the menstrual cycle? So guys, FSH stimulates the release of eggs? No. LH stimulates the release of eggs. B is the right answer. You all know that FSH is the follicle stimulating hormone. It stimulates the production of eggs, right? Not the release of eggs. LH is involved in ovulation, and we can say that LH stimulates the release of eggs. If you talk about estrogen, so guys, estrogen repairs the uterus lining and not maintains the uterus lining. Progesterone maintains the uterus lining, right? So the options are crisscrossed, and C and D are wrong. A is also wrong. Answer is B. Let's move on to MCQ number 33. Which human feature shows discontinuous variation? So guys, you all know that blood group shows discontinuous variation. Why? That's because the blood groups are distinct, right? And you can easily distinguish between different blood groups, and there are less number of blood groups available. So there is blood group A, blood group B, blood group A, B, and O, and these all blood groups are distinct from each other. You can easily distinguish between these blood groups, and whenever you can distinguish between the phenotypes, that is discontinuous variation. If you talk about hair color, so it's very difficult to distinguish between different shades of black and different shades of brown, so that is continuous variation and not discontinuous. If you talk about height, so height has many values, and it's difficult to distinguish sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between the heights of two individuals because their heights are very, very close. Their heights are different, but they're very close, so you cannot distinguish that. So height is continuous variation. If you talk about foot length, so foot length has also many values, and sometimes you won't be able to distinguish between the foot lengths of the two individuals. These foot lengths will appear similar, but they will be somewhat different. There will be small differences. So whenever there are small differences, variation is continuous, and whenever there are large differences, whenever you can easily distinguish, then that is the discontinuous variation, and blood group belongs to discontinuous variation. Let's move on to the next MCQ, that is MCQ number 34. Which statements about genes and chromosomes are correct? So a chromosome contains DNA. Yes, guys, this is true. You all know that chromosome contains DNA molecule, and a gene is a section of DNA. Yes, this is true as well. There are many genes on the DNA and gene is a section of DNA. So the answer is A. Let's move on to MCQ number 35. The diagram shows a family in which some members suffer from a disease caused by a recessive allele. So guys, you need to note in this MCQ that the disease is caused by recessive allele. And if the disease is caused by the recessive allele, the diseased individuals will be homozygous recessive, right? Because the disease is caused by the recessive allele. So you all know that recessive allele only expresses itself whenever there is homozygous condition. That means that both the alleles should be recessive, for example, small a, for the disease to occur. So all the diseased individuals will be homozygous with both the recessive alleles, right? And the diseased individuals are shown with gray. Identify two members of the family who must be heterozygous for the gene. So guys, if we look at the couple 1 and 2, they produce all the offspring which are normal and not diseased. It means that 2 is homozygous dominant, right? Because if 2 is homozygous dominant and both the alleles are dominant, so the children will be heterozygous, right? And obviously, if they're heterozygous, they will not get the disease because the disease is due to the recessive allele, and disease can only, a person can only get the disease when both the alleles are recessive. So 4 and 5 are heterozygous. And what about 7? Obviously, guys, if the mother over here is diseased, has small a, and the father over here has capital A small a, and if this daughter does not have a disease, so she must also be heterozygous because she will get one normal allele from the father and one abnormal allele from the mother, right? So she must be heterozygous. So what individuals are heterozygous? 4, 5, and 7. So identify two members of the family who must be heterozygous for the gene. So the answer is A, 5, and 7, right? Let's move on to MCQ number 36. Which statement identifies a possible benefit of genetically modified crop plants? So guys, we have to choose an option which shows a possible benefit of genetically modifying the crop plants. Some crop plants can be genetically modified to give resistance to diseases. Guys, this is true. We modify crop plants genetically to make them resistant to particular diseases, right? And this is a beneficial point because we know that many crops, they are susceptible to many diseases, and if they get the disease, the crop yield will significantly decrease. So what we can do, we can make them genetically modified so they will not be affected by the disease and the yield will improve, and that is a possible benefit. So answer is A, right? What about other options? Cross-pollination of genetically modified crop plants with weeds could produce new varieties of weeds. Guys, there is no possible benefit of producing new varieties of weeds, right? The use of genetically modified crops may explain the increase in food allergies in children. This is not a possible benefit. There is more research needed on the long-term effects of genetically modified crops on the environment. This is also a vague point, does not show any benefit. MCQ number 37. The diagram shows a pyramid of biomass for a food chain. Which level represents the producers? So guys, always remember this point that producer belongs to the first trophic level and that is at the lowest point. So guys, D is the producer. MCQ number 38. Which stage of the carbon cycle depends on the presence of bacteria and fungi in the soil? So guys, bacteria and fungi in the soil are involved in decomposition, right? Because we all know that bacteria and fungi are decomposers. They decay or they feed on dead matter and urine and feces. So decomposition is the stage of the carbon cycle which depends on bacteria and fungi. The answer is B. Let's move on to the MCQ number 39. The graph shows changes in the populations of plant and animal plankton, microscopic organisms in a lake. Consider the following statements in relation to the data provided by the graph. Population changes in animal plankton occur after similar changes in plant plankton because the animals feed on plants. Which description fits this statement? So guys, let's have a look at the graph. So the dotted line is for the plant plankton and the firm line is for the animal plankton, right? So we can see that first the plant plankton rises, and as it rises, the animal plankton starts to rise, and then the animal plankton reaches peak and the plant planktons fall. So as the plant planktons fall, the animal planktons fall as well, and then the plant planktons rise, and then the animal planktons rise again. So guys, from this curve, from these curves, we can judge that the animal plankton population depends on the plant plankton. Why? Because animal planktons are eating the plant planktons. So when the plant planktons rise, the animal planktons start eating on the plant planktons, and animal planktons start to rise. So when the animal planktons start to eat plant planktons, the plant planktons they start to fall, and as the plant planktons fall, the animal planktons start to fall as well because the food availability decreases. So over here they have given the statement, and what is that? Population changes in the animal plankton occur after similar changes in the plant plankton because the animals feed on the plants. And guys, this is true that the animal plankton are following the similar changes in population as the plant plankton. Both the graphs are matching, right? So the population changes in the animal plankton occur after similar changes in the plant plankton because the animals feed on the plants. Which description fits the statement? It is possible interpretation of the data. Guys, this is the answer A. It is a possible interpretation of the data. This is possible. The data do not support the statement. No, it supports. The data are too random to be interpreted. No, it is the only way to interpret the data. Guys, there can be other ways to interpret the data as well. Okay, MCQ number 40. When untreated sewage flows into a river, why does the oxygen concentration decreases? So guys, as you all know that sewage contains urine and feces, and urine and feces are decomposed by the bacteria present in the liver. Sorry, river, not liver, in the river. So whenever we dump untreated sewage, the untreated sewage contains urine and feces, right? The untreated sewage contains urine and feces, and whenever you dump the untreated sewage into the river, the oxygen concentration in the river decreases. Why? Because the bacteria in the river, or maybe bacteria may also be present in the untreated sewage. These bacteria, they decompose urine and feces and use up oxygen. So the answer is that there is an increase in the number of bacteria. And why the bacteria increase in the river? That's because the bacteria might be coming in the untreated sewage, or they may be present in the river, and they suddenly got a lot of matter to decompose on or to feed on. Do you get this point? So whenever they get a lot of food or a lot of matter to decompose, they will multiply and their number will increase, and when their number will increase, they will consume oxygen in the river, and this will result in the fall in the oxygen concentration in the river. Sorry. So the answer is C. So guys, we are done with the paper. Thank you so much for watching. Allah Hafiz everyone.